it's worth taking this passage of Polonius's advice as a freestanding little bit. It does read like a set piece, it sounds like a set piece, it is a list of precepts. They are imperatives, again, throughout. Be thou familiar, grapple them, bear it at the opposed, give every man. They are imperatives. But they're not imperatives that are directed at any specific moment. They're directed at a man who's about to embark, literally onto a boat, but also, if the journey metaphor maintains, on a journey through life. So they're general pieces of advice. Now that does enable us to play the game, and I know one of us has already started playing it, of looking at just how applicable those bits of advice are for Laertes as he continues throughout the play. Well, two things are particularly worth isolating. One is, beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in't, bear that the opposed may beware of thee. Now that is exactly the situation that he finds himself in with Hamlet. He is not at all wary about entering into that conflict, but it is certainly the case that what with his bravado and also with Claudius conniving, Hamlet does genuinely have something to fear. In fact, the only reason why Hamlet isn't afraid of that conflict is because, as he explains to Horatio, he's resigned to it not going his way. There is a providence in the fall of the sparrow, and the readiness is all. Those two observations. Another extraordinary thing to bear in mind is that Polonius comes out with this insight: for the apparel oft proclaims the man. Now, we've just seen Hamlet explaining his own attire by saying, I have that within which passeth show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. And here we have Polonius actually endorsing the idea that the way you look does actually proclaim who you are. It's actually an idea with which Claudius struggles when he talks about the harlot's cheek not being more ugly compared to the paint that covers it, as his crime is to how he actually appears. So we are in a world where we have to be very suspicious of the way people appear. And again, Hamlet's urge towards that contempt for the world makes him especially dubious about what's actually going on beneath that surface. There is a quick joke about the French, and they in France are the best rank and station of the most select and generous. There are other lessons for life, neither a borrower nor a lender be, things which have fallen into a world of commonplace and cliche. Now, we began by saying that these are quite general pieces of advice, and it is worth bearing in mind the world, and again this is a section B-ish thing, but it is worth bearing in mind the world in which Polonius makes them. Polonius is offering general truths, again in a world that is, as Jonathan Bates says, beholden to the laws of Cicero, and that even Walsingham, Polonius's kind of real-life equivalent, would have a copy of Cicero's De Officiis with him at all times. So we can see here a kind of general public responsibility, tolerance for others, a way of making the personal choices you make as sociable and civilized, as apt to the common good as possible. One final point to make is that Dominic Dromgoole looks quite closely at this speech, and he finds in it a loving father, a concerned father, one who actually genuinely does have good advice, and actually who speaks like dads tend to do. So rather than the bluster that I slightly suggest with the snapshot of the American dad, you can look at this scene as intimate. It's not often played that way. In the Cush Jumbo production, Laertes and Ophelia are speculating on whether or not and when Polonius will whip out an impressive-looking credit card. In other ones, you quite often see Laertes and Ophelia vying to see who can actually lip sync with the advice because it's so predictable. So we do here have Polonius as a windbag, but also you do have the beginnings of an explanation about why losing him is so traumatic to both of his children.